Hi everyone, my name is Cindy, and for this week's Module 10, it covered race, racialization, and racism within Canadian society. And for my two presentation, I kind of want to talk more about the connections between race and the myth of multiculturalism. So, for some quick content overview, I'm going to go over key terms and concepts from this week's readings. I'm going to introduce a bit of historical context to better understand the issue at hand. I'm then going to introduce the article that I chose and provide an analysis of the article in relation to the course content. And finally, I'm going to pose two discussion questions for you guys to reflect on. Key terms and concepts from Module 10. Race refers to a group of people categorized together by physical traits, and it's important to note that this is a socially constructed concept and doesn't have any biological basis. Ethnicity refers to a group of people categorized together by shared cultural traits. Racism refers to the prejudice or discriminatory treatment of an individual or group of people on the basis of race and ethnicity. Institutional racism is a form of racism, and it refers to the discrimination of a racial group by structures of power through social and political institutions. Historical context. Canada was founded on white settler colonialism and violence. Because of this, the structure of Canadian society operates under a framework of white supremacy. The pursuit of profit influenced imperial expansion into parts of the world under the guise of civilizing groups of people that were deemed inferior. Under this justification, these groups became the racialized other and were forcibly assimilated into the dominant culture or subjected to forms of slavery. Under capitalism and economic expansion, the land, culture, identity, and resources of these groups were forcibly taken. Therefore, racism exists as a driving force that continues to affect Indigenous populations and other racialized groups to this day. So, the article I chose comes from the news site Rabble, which is a socialist news site dedicated to social justice activism. And the title of the article is Multicultural Diversity is Not Racial Equality. So, in the article, the author kind of interrogates the myth of multiculturalism that is a part of Canada's national identity and policy. They note that Canada operates under a framework of multiculturalism that celebrates racial diversity and the acceptance of all cultures. Therefore, multiculturalism is often equated with anti racism and the idea of equal opportunity regardless of race. However, this masks the realities and instances of racism many minorities continue to face, as well as undermines the existence of white power. For example, in the article, Toronto is noted to be Canada's most culturally diverse city, but it's also known for the widest racial income gap. Multiculturalism doesn't account for the wide gaps in income between whites and non whites and doesn't do anything to address or fix it. Although Canada was the first country to adopt this policy, Indigenous, Black people, and other racial minorities are still subjected to racism. Analysis and connections to course content. So, clear connections can be made between multiculturalism and capitalism. Multiculturalism promotes immigration, which in turn grows the labor market in Canada. However, racial minorities do not find equality under this policy and remain socially, politically, and economically distant from attaining the same opportunities as their white counterparts. Racism has shifted and become less overt and more institutionalized. Furthermore, under the guise of multiculturalism, immigration has contributed to the growth of the settler state and obscures Canada's history of colonial violence and racism against Indigenous peoples. In a quote from Naiman, multiculturalism has drawn attention away from the inequalities of power and the root causes of difference within the Canadian mosaic. On to the discussion questions. They're a bit oppositional to one another, but I think the concept of multiculturalism is extremely complex and there can be perceived pros and cons to adopting it. So, my first question is, how does multiculturalism undermine Indigenous agency? And in what ways can you interpret this as racially motivated? And then, given the rise of xenophobia and anti immigrant policies, especially with reference to the policies of the USA, how might Canada's policy of multiculturalism actually benefit social cohesion within society? I'm really looking forward to see what kind of answers you guys have to this question, and thank you so much for listening to my presentation.